Chapter 6 That day that Alex felt almost like himself again, thinner, weaker, yet in some way stronger, he thought, "This is the day I must leave." And yet he remained another day. What held him? He did not know. Anything would be better than this, he thought: the cold, the filth, the smells, the smoke, the terrible food, the vermin. And yet this had become something he was familiar with. He didn't know what was out there in the streets. Worse, he feared he did know. "I'll have to go now," he said to Peter finally. "Okay," Peter said, "but first there's something you have to do." "You know?" "What's that?" Alex asked. "You have to replace the herbs we gave you for your fever. Your fever was long, and we used them all. Now, if one of us was ill, we would have none." "But how can I do that?" Alex asked. "Nothing is growing now in the snow, and where in Moscow could they grow anyhow?" Everyone laughed. "Oh, where do they grow?" Boris mimicked. "Where do they grow?" "Shut up, Boris," Peter said. "A chemist is where they're at, like a pharmacy." Of course. There is still one that has not been closed in this district. But I have no money to buy them. "Do you think I thought you did?" Peter said impatiently. "You'll take them, just the way we always do. Now, come on. Sooner is better than later." "But I have never stolen anything," Alex protested. "Then you'll have to learn," Peter said, laughing. "It's a skill, a trade like any other." "But I don't want to learn to be a thief." Now Peter looked angry. "Listen, fool, I've helped you until now, but you have a debt to pay. Come along. Ivan will help you. He will keep the chemist so busy in the front of the shop, you won't have any trouble at all getting the herbs from the jars in the back. And Kostya will keep watch outside. If it were not so easy, do you think I would have you do it?" Now out in the cold they went, single file, through the cellar door, and like cellar rats scurried against the walls, through the snowy streets and alleys, across the Moskva River, to the apteka, the chemist, a pharmacist, one of the few shops still operating in the street of boarded-up buildings. Kostya posted himself outside, while Alex, his heart beating fast in his chest, accompanied Ivan into the shop. Ivan started moving quickly among the displayed bottles and jars, putting his hand out as if to touch one thing, then moving to another. The chemist came from behind the heavy wooden counter, visibly worried, watching Ivan's every move. "What do you want?" he asked, following Ivan around. "Don't touch anything." "Comrade," Ivan said, his wide-set eyes innocent in his comical face, "watch me carefully. I am touching nothing." Nothing at all, and he held his hands out in front of him, moving quickly around the front of the store. As instructed, Alex, with a heart beating fast in his chest, eased quietly to the back of the shop and quickly ducked behind the counter, where he could see the jars stacked neatly: balm, bitters, calla, chamomile, celandine. Quickly, Alex whisked the top from a jar and dipped his hand into the dried heads of elecampane, the bitter weed that had cured his fever. A fistful in each pocket, and he was out in front of the counter and ready to leave. The chemist was now red and explosive. "This is not the place to stand," he was shouting at Ivan. "This is my shop. Out, now." "Your shop?" Ivan asked innocently. "I beg your pardon, comrade. I thought everything belonged to the people now. I thought this floor was mine as well as yours, and that I could stand on it, enjoy the warmth and pleasant odors, and admire the splendid jars. But you say no." Alex prodded him. He wanted to get out. "Very well," Ivan said sadly. "My comrade and I will leave, as you ask. Come, Sergei," he said to Alex. "Did you get it so fast?" Ivan exclaimed, when they had rejoined Kostya and were walking away quickly. Alex nodded. He was still shaking, but was diverted by Ivan's dramatic performance. "You could have been an actor," he said admiringly. "At home I have seen traveling companies of actors, and you were just as good. Truly." "My parents were in the circus," Ivan said proudly. "I am a circus kid. All my brothers and sisters were. We all did a great trick together called the mill. My father would hang upside down on the trapeze, holding a strap in his teeth. Then, slowly, to the roll of drums, he would draw each one of us children up into the air onto the strap, twirling, the spotlight on us, showing us wearing costumes with wings. It was magnificent." "But why did you leave the circus?" Alex asked. "I think that would be a fine life." "Oh, it was," Ivan said. "My father and mother were taken away one night after they did a tightrope act. My father was dressed as Lenin, and my mother as Trotsky, and they would teeter on the rope and then fall every which way into a net. People loved it. To be fair, they used to do the Tsar as well, but they were taken away." They lingered along the side of a building on the square, watching people come and go. peasants in their knitted hats and boots, gentlemen with canes, old grandmothers with wide peasant skirts, and babushkas. That was good, the way you worked in the shop, Ivan said. Then a lady walked slowly by, carrying packages in both arms. Creeping silently behind her, Kostya, moving at the same pace, whipped out a small knife and cut a piece of fur from the back of her coat, then let her proceed, unaware of the mayhem committed upon her garment. Alex's mouth dropped open. I'll get sausage for dinner for that, Kostya said, waving the fur in Alex's face. They crossed the square and entered another marketplace, where Kostya dashed out of sight, returned shortly with a good-sized piece of sausage. Alex's mouth was filled with anticipatory juices. In this quarter, wherever they walked, the sharp towers and bright domes of the Kremlin could be seen. Above all, a red flag flew. It did not mean very much to Alex. He only knew that the revolution had overthrown Tsar Nicholas. But he knew there were still arguments about who was in power. His father had said Lenin was very ill. They came into Red Square by the Iberian Gate to the north. To the right, the red brick, battlemented walls of the Kremlin rose, punctuated by 20 towers. At the opposite side of the square were many domed cathedral of St. Basil's, built by Tsar Ivan the Terrible, a mass of color and patterns more elaborate than anything Alex had ever seen. He remembered his uncle had told him that Tsar Ivan had the architects blinded so they could never produce anything better. Like the other squares, Red Square was policed by soldiers, and the three boys clung to the edge as they crossed to the side street. In one corner there was a tiny wooden booth where an old lady was selling Narzan, water of the Caucasus. The tram clattered by, full of passengers, but carrying as well dozens of wild children who were swarming on the roofs and sides like fleas. The three boys dodged down alleys and crossed and recrossed the great Moskva River, which snaked through the city. Alex saw again the groups of urchins sitting in the street, sprawling or sleeping in piles on steps, running in packs like wild creatures, unkempt, filthy, rowdy. Then he saw the expressions of revulsion and fear on the people's faces as the children passed. Back at the cellar, other boys were returning from errands of their own, bringing water, clothing, rags, papers, scraps of rotting wood for the fires, stolen vegetables. Just as Alex, Ivan, and Kostya appeared, Peter arrived holding a perfect pudding. Imagine cooling a pudding in a window, unless it was meant as a gift for us, he laughed. Did you get the herbs? He asked Alex. Yes, I got some, Alex said, emptying his pockets. Some? I should say you got some. That's enough for a month. You're a born thief, he said, pounding Alex on the back. He was like one of us, Ivan said. I didn't even see him go behind the counter myself. He's smart, Miska said. I knew he could do it. Now he can stay with us. The effect of this on Alex surprised him. He had planned to leave as soon as he had delivered the herbs and discharged his debt. But suddenly he found himself drawn to the warmth of Peter's compliment and Miska's confidence. Close around this little fire, he was temporarily protected from the loneliness of the dark gray-walled streets of the city by these filthy, ignorant, diseased boys who had made him welcome. You'll stay, Alex, Miska said, pulling at his coat. Well, just for a little while, Alex found himself saying. He had not planned to say it. Just until I can figure out what to do. By then the pudding had been divided into many tiny pieces. There wasn't more than a taste for each, but the experience was nourishing to the spirit. If you stay, Peter said, you must work. Everyone here must work to eat, and you must follow our rules or we will throw you out. What are the rules? Alex asked, looking at the hodgepodge of a kennel. Thinking of this disordered helter-skelter existence. No drinking, Boris said sullenly. He doesn't like that, Miska hissed to Alex. Alex laughed. But I don't drink alcohol, he said. I would not be allowed to, except for water with a little wine in it. And where would you get wine or vodka anyways? Grigory poked Miska. I thought you said that one was smart, he growled. You wouldn't ask if you had been taken in by some of the other bands, Ivan said. That is what they do with most of the money they steal. They buy vodka. Or cocaine, Basil said. And no cocaine here or any such thing, Peter said. Just once, and we throw you out by the seat of your pants. You must not bring any boys in here who have typhus or syphilis, Peter continued. Alex could hardly believe these rules. He had thought they'd be something like school rules, something to do with duties, perhaps punishments for failure to do one's share. These are some of the important everyday rules, Peter said. Our band is different from most other bands. This is Jacob the Baker's band. We are here because of him. But how many bands are there? Alex asked. Who could tell? Kostya answered. Hundreds. When we go south, you will see it is like a river of boys. He laughed. Last year they tried to keep us all out of Tashkent, just to save the melons from us locusts. I can't wait to go for the melons, said Miska, swallowing saliva as he thought of the juicy fruit. You made yourself sick with melons, Kostya said. So did you, Miska replied. Everyone does. When can we go, Peter? In spring, as usual, stupid. If we went now, we'd be eating green fruits, and everyone knows there is not as good a living otherwise in the south. Peasants have no pockets. Everyone laughed. There's little to steal, and nobody has any money to buy it, Kostya said. They have food growing in the fields, but when it is not growing, there is nothing else for us. There's one more rule, and it's the most important, Peter said. We do not kill. Kill? Alex cried. Listen, Peter said, almost angrily. There are many, many homeless ones in this city, and all the cities and towns. They all do what we need. They all need what we need, something to eat, somewhere to sleep, and keep warm. They must try to get it as they know how. We try to get it with our skills. Others, without skills, do it with their fists, rocks, sticks, and knives. If you are in danger, perhaps you may have to protect yourself, but you must not kill if you are with us. It's not their fault that they have something we need, any more than it is our fault that we need it. And for the people who do not like our rules, Peter glanced around the smoky cellar meaningfully, accusingly, for those people, there are other bands who will have them. Miska now came up with his old red book. He said nothing, just pressed it upon Alex. Once again, Alex opened the volume and read of the spirits who lived in the folklore, of the Voyanoi, who haunted the waters bearded and ugly. It was he who caused the storms at sea, who smashed ships, caused floods. On the other hand, when he was feeling pleasant, he would lead the fish into the fishermen's nets. In the waters with him lived a beautiful Risaki, who sang so beautifully in the moonlight that some of the fishermen would drown themselves seeking them. Mermaids, in other words. Mishka listened, as did some of the others, and their faces were tense and anxious, as were all Russian children's, when they heard of these ancient spirits. But now Alex wondered, would these children fear such spirits when they did not fear running homeless and starving in the streets of Moscow? Today, Alex said to Alex, you will go with Kostya and Ivan again. They are good knockers. They will show you how a knocker works. It's a good way for you to begin. All you will do is stand guard just the way you did when you helped Miska. I wasn't standing guard, I was just there. That's it. You will just be there and you will keep your collar up and around your face so you can do it over and over and no one will recognize you. Be careful. Remember, if you are caught, we are all in danger. Alex followed Kostya and Ivan out of the cellar. They were both smaller than he, their faces almost black with the oily smoke of the fire, their scrawny bodies covered in the same dreadful rags they all wore. Beside them, Alex felt handsomely clad, although his coat was now tan and covered with soot and oil stains. His boots could hardly be seen beneath the crusted dirt. They moved swiftly, holding close to the gray walls of the building, until they came out on the street near a market Alex had not seen before. They waited as a procession of workers marched by, bearing flags and signs against capitalism. Just as they were entering the square, a tall woman with a black coat and heavy black boots paused them. She wore her hair in a low knot, held in place by a decorative tortoise comb. Quicker than a darting bug, upon Ivan's hand shot up and claimed the comb. Alex's breath caught in his throat. Would the woman scream? She did not. She kept on walking, never having felt the swift hand that took her comb. Now, incredibly to Alex, Ivan approached the woman, running along beside her. Madame, he called, I'd like to sell you a handsome comb from your hair. The woman ignored him, but he persisted, dancing in front of her and waving the comb. 20 kopecks only, madame, for this beautiful work of art. The woman stopped. But that's just like mine, she cried, touching her hair. It is mine, you little thief. Give it back this instant. Ivan looked shocked. No, no, you are mistaken. This is mine, but I will offer it to you since you have none, for only 15 kopecks. Now that's a bargain you may not find again. You would have to pay 4 times that to buy a new one. The woman sighed. She knew it was true. Filthy little robber, she muttered, and put some coins in his hand. Ivan bowed and handed her the comb. Why did Peter want me to come along for that? Alex asked. I didn't do anything, and I would never be able to do anything like that myself. You must have a touch like feathers. Oh, that wasn't the place you were to stand guard, Kostya said. That was a little extra Ivan did on the spur of the moment. We have to take opportunity where we find it. Okay, now, Hugh continued, I'm going to duck into the alley just there. You will lean here against the building. Walk back and forth a little now and look at the sky. Pretend you're waiting for someone. If a soldier is in sight, you are supposed to start whistling. Can you whistle? He asked anxiously. Yes, but what about Ivan? You just do your job. He will do his. Alex leaned against the building. A wet wind blew around and out of the square. He pulled his collar up and remembered that Peter had said to keep his face hidden. He pulled his cap down. Meanwhile, Ivan seemed to be doing the same thing a little farther down the street. He looked much like a person waiting for someone who was late, looking around impatiently. He would leave his place a minute, start off somewhere, then return. A few people passed and paid no attention to him or to Kostya. A dumpy peasant woman, layered in scarves and skirts, went by carrying a roll of rags on her shoulder. An old man passed, ill-dressed, limping, pulling a heavy package in the snow. Then a stout woman appeared at the corner. She wore a warm wool coat and carried a large, heavy handbag. Kostya seemed not to notice her, but as she came abreast of him, he suddenly fell and sprawled on the ground directly at her feet, causing her to lose her balance, teeter, and fall. Alex was alarmed. Had the same thing had happened to him happened to Kostya? A fever, perhaps? He started to run towards him, but stopped when he saw Ivan spring into the alley, grabbed the woman's handbag, and disappeared back down the alley with Kostya, suddenly revived right behind him. Alex had the impulse to help her. She seemed so distressed. But something pulled him away, and he turned quickly and followed Kostya and Ivan, who were waiting for him at the end of the alley. They grabbed him and pulled him under a wall and into an empty lot. There, behind a pile of trash, Kostya ripped open the bag. A scent of perfume arose from it that bit into Alex's memory for a moment and made him close his eyes. Kostya was digging like a rabbit, making a burrow. He produced 2 rubles and a handkerchief. He put the handkerchief in his pocket and the bag under his jacket, making him only a little lumpier than he was anyways. They skirted the early morning streets, crossed the Moskovrotsky Bridge to another market more organized and crowded than the one they had visited before. As they went, Alex kept noting the wild flights of the ragged children, sometimes shrieking like pack wolves, sometimes silent. The other times they appeared to be driven leaves blown by a strong wind, circling. Here and there, small children begged and were occasionally given a coin, and young girls holding up infants cried, "A kopeck to feed my baby, only a kopeck." Now they were in Sverdlov Square, its garden filled with snow, where Alex had remembered a mosaic of geraniums and begonias when he visited his uncle. The great opera house dominated the square, and at the curb were the old carriage drivers, the izvoschiks, wearing heavy cloaks and fur bonnets, looking like great sleeping bears as they waited for their fares. Do people really travel in these anymore? Alex wondered. The izvochiks seemed left there from a grander, quieter time. Also left from a grander day was the statue of a chariot and horse, in the middle of the square, now swathed in scaffolding. They turned into a street where a line of people stretched in a snake around the corner. Into this line Ivan pushed Alex. "You stand here," he said. "But why?" Alex asked. "Because, blockhead, at the end of the line is bread. That is the government store. I'll be back before you reach the end. Dance a beat about, and your feet won't freeze in place. Kostya will be close by." With that, Ivan disappeared, but Kostya slowly walked in and out of the line of people, peddling the handbag. Alex worried that Kostya would be arrested, but the people in the line seemed unsurprised to be approached by a thief. Those Alex saw merely shook their heads and seemed to pin their attention on the slow progress of the line. He waited nervously, standing from one frozen foot and then the other. And as he waited, a well-dressed man came up and pressed a kopeck into his hand, saying, "Hold a place for me, boy," and quickly left. In a short time, a woman came and did the same. By the time Kostya reappeared, cheerfully holding up 2 rubles, Alex had collected coins from 4 customers who returned and took their places in front of him. So now, he said to himself, I am like the urchin to whom Katerina Sergeyeva gave a kopeck that day so long ago. In the excitement of this morning's lessons in thievery in the square, in the days spent in the cellar, it had not been nearly so clear as this. I am just such a waif as they, he said to himself, and again this terrible feeling of loss took hold. Alex, you dumb ox, Ivan was shaking him. You have to keep moving about or you'll freeze standing in one place. Here, it is nearly our turn. Ask for 2 loaves. And he pushed a coin into Alex's hand. They each got the maximum, 2 loaves, and tucking them under their arms, returned the way they had come, crossing the snowy street. The snow clung in great globules around the wire cages of the street lamps, which the government installed to keep them from being stolen. The boys threw balls of snow at them to make them fall into explosive bursts. Everywhere, the bands of wild children moved through the snow or appeared suddenly from under an abandoned wagon, an old packing case. They huddled among the trash and ashes of the back alleys. They flew like wounded birds against the new snow. The aroma of bread tortured them all the way, yet none took a bite. Alex already knew this from his days in the cellar, that all the food was property of everyone in the band, and that it must be divided by the person in charge that day. Peter, just coming in from an errand of his own, met them and praised their contributions to the day's meal. Lenin took the bread and cut it carefully with short blade that was kept on the wall. What doesn't that wall contain? Alex wondered. Kostya threw a good-sized sausage into the low makeshift table, um, made of a board balanced on stones. Kostya emptied his pockets of a handful of groats. Some good morning's work, Peter said, as the children came round for their portions. The groats were thrown into a kettle of water, and by the time their feet had begun to thaw a bit, a bowl of this thin, hot gruel was ready to take out. Where did you get these groats? Alex asked Kostya. Hand fast, eye slow, he said. We'll keep the sausage for tonight, Peter said. 2 meals are better than one. It's a good day when we have 2 meals, Kostya said. From the next fire, a voice growled, It's a good day when we have one. In the silence of the cellar, the children moved into a world of their own. No sounds of Moscow reached them here, no sights. In the cellar, no GPU, no soldiers, no hard-faced officials tried to catch them and detain them in children's home, not better than a jail. Here, at least, if we are happy, cold, and filthy, we have we are those things while we are free, Peter said. We are alive, and we are free, he had said at another time, when they were bitterly cold and food was scarce. This is more than many people are. In the smoke and blackness of the cellar crypt, it was impossible to imagine a world in which everyone was warm, everyone was fed, everyone lived in the protection of a family. As he lay on the dirt floor in his fetid clothing, scratching at the fleas and lice that were attacking, feeling his only partly filled belly, Alex pretended this was not a country at war with itself. He imagined things as they were so long ago, when he might be walking out in the winter sun with his family, nodding at neighbors, running through the city streets like one of the rats. Alex pretended that order and love were still alive, and he was not only camping with old Tolka in the forest in Kovrov, that he had dug through the snow to the fallen leaves, as Tolka had shown him, and made a warm bed under the snow, and above him, as Tolka had shown him, and made a warm bed under the snow, and in the morning he'd be going home. All over Moscow, in other cities and towns, and on the roads, children slept, and not safely in their beds. They slept in doorways and cellars and empty ruins. They slept like lumps of coal in the middle of the Moscow streets, in asphalt cauldrons in which the fires had died. Hundreds of thousands of the homeless slept, deserted except by each other.